Between Nick Fury talking about the Avenger Initiative and Tony Stark's surprise appearance at the end of The Incredible Hulk, it was pretty much clear that Marvel was going to do their damnedest to keep their promises. The problem was, there wasn't exactly a how-to manual for building a shared universe at the time. It could be safe to assume that in order for them to plan this out, they would have to set up a lot of stuff to build on the idea that there is indeed a bigger world out there. And if they were ever going to make their big show possible, they may have to throw in a lot of setup. Unfortunately, Iron Man 2 was the one to shoulder that burden. Getting the obvious criticisms out of the way, yes, this film is bloated as hell. There's a lot of stuff being thrown at you in this one, from Tony's palladium poisoning, his resulting self-destructive behavior, his relationship with his father, to the government beating down his door for the Iron Man suit, Stark's rivalry with Justin Hammer, the revenge vow of Ivan Vanko, to the seemingly random appearance of Black Widow. I trust you're seeing the problem here. There was a lot to dish out on an audience who really just wanted to see the continuing adventures of Tony Stark. And the sad part is, the writing was on the wall of what story they wanted to tell. Fans of Iron Man wanted to see the celebrated demon in a bottle story, where Tony succumbs to alcoholism, and it's clear to see why. It's a compelling journey to take a superhero who very appropriately has a history of compulsive overindulgence. You can even see the fingerprints of the story in Iron Man 2. Unfortunately, it gets buried by the torrential downpour of setup for the Avengers. So, interesting question is, after all this time, after the Avengers has come and gone, did the setups pay off? In a way, yes. Hindsight is probably Iron Man 2's best friend, and it's all due in part to all the things that come to pass in later installments of the MCU. Let me illustrate. Firstly, Black Widow. While not much is said about her in this film, you still get the ebb and flow of how effectively she operates as a spy. The fight sequence at Hammer perfectly shows off how she makes taking down a dozen burly guards look effortless, particularly with that being juxtaposed with how Happy is having a bitch of a time with just one guard. While we don't get enough in Iron Man 2 to know her, there is still enough to intrigue us, and thus seeing more of her in films to come was always welcome, as we feel like we got to know her more and more. So when we go back and watch this film again, you realize that there's just the right amount of her in this film when you take into account the impact she would have in the universe later. Another payoff that we weren't expecting was that of Senator Stern. This was a comedic footnote as far as Iron Man 2 was concerned, but finding out that Stern was a member of Hydra in The Winter Soldier made a joke character sinister as hell. And now when we go back and watch the Senate hearing scene, you can't deny the air of danger in this scene, as you now know that Stern had a darker MO for wanting Tony's tech. Then there's the one payoff that frankly I am shocked no one else has picked up on. This is regarding the new element that Howard Stark bequeathed to Tony, the element that would go on to create a new clean source of energy which Tony would use to power his entire empire. At this point, we didn't know Howard Stark apart from the flattering descriptions Tony gives to Fury.
He was cold, he was calculating, he never told me he loved me, he never even told me he liked me.
But as we got to know him in The First Avenger, Agent Carter, Ant-Man, and Civil War, we discovered that there was more to him than the booze and the bravado. So, the question is, where did he get the idea for this source of energy? Well, lest we forget what he fished out of the ocean at the end of The First Avenger. What has S.H.I.E.L.D. been trying to do with it in the decades since? Well, Captain Marvel offered some strong hints, but before that, Howard Stark had been working out how to siphon energy from the Tesseract, and got very close, but not close enough to finish, so he left it to Tony to figure out. So, the power in the arc reactor is in fact an offshoot of energy from the Tesseract. Didn't you wonder why Loki's staff didn't work on Tony? It was essentially the same power as that from an Infinity Stone.
Did I just blow your mind?
I admit this is not a justification. Iron Man 2 is still something of a mess, and the things fans wanted to see from this film were merely touched upon, as opposed to going full on, and yet the film is still incredibly watchable. Downey Jr. aside, Tony's relationship with Pepper actually gets a lot of development in this one, and actually lands in a really good spot by the end of it. You also get to see her deal with the growing pains of becoming the new CEO of Stark Industries. She even takes it upon herself to get Justin Hammer arrested. Another improvement that this film has over the first one, I'm gonna say it, Don Cheadle is way better as Rhodey. I was expecting a backlash there. So yeah, he is. He's got a better camaraderie with Robert Downey Jr., he's got a better sense of comedic timing, and he looks totally badass in the War Machine suit. Plus, when you really think about it, Terrence Howard was a little too subdued in the first one, and you just don't get the feeling that he would have gelled with the rest of the MCU the way Don Cheadle does. I guess you could say that's another thing Iron Man 2 gave us that paid off in the long run. So because of that, I can easily go back and rewatch Iron Man 2 with little reluctance and get even more satisfaction with the benefit of hindsight. But it is hard to ignore the chagrin that many felt upon its initial release.